So let's let that dry and then we will start painting. Let me zoom in on that for you so you can see that better. All right, so the first thing that I've done, as usual, is to lay in a wash, a very light wash of cerulean blue for the sky. That just gives us some sky. This painting is not about the sky, so we don't need to spend a lot of effort on that. So now the next thing we do after we finished our masking, of course, is to look at our color combinations. So first one we have here is Murray Violet, which I just call this, because it's a mix I make myself, of ultramarine blue, which is Senoyer, and I mix in some PR 122, which is quinacridone magenta, to get this beautiful color. If you don't want to mix your own, Winsor Newton makes a color called Smalt, which is very similar. Core makes a color called Ultramarine Blue Violet, which is also very similar. That's this one right here. You can see how close they are. So it's just a simple way of making your own. So we are using raw sienna in this painting. Very versatile color. So if you want to make some of this, you want to make these more neutral colors, which are actually a beige. If you put the slightest bit of ultramarine, or of the purple or ultramarine blue into this raw sienna, you'll get this nice beige color, which is the color of the stone in this church. And if you need the darker version of it, if you just add a little bit of burnt sienna to it, you'll get a darker version of that color. So we're going to need quite a bit of this, so let's mix up a fair amount of that so we can get this initial wash in. So we're just doing that with a lot of water. We're not going to mix up the tree color yet, but we will get started with these. So the first thing we're going to do is, let me get out my photo. So you can see here in this photo that I got off the internet, the color of the limestone. It's similar to limestone. I'm not sure if it is limestone, but it is a limestone color. So here's the black and white of the church. Here are some modifications I made through using the apps we'll talk about when we talked about composition and adjusting your hues and making paintings more exciting. So I went in and adjusted all the settings on my iPad and came up with these different variations in color. So you can see this one, which is really pretty. It pushes the darks to a bluer, purplier color, a blue purple or blue violet. It pushes the stones to a more burnt sienna type color, which I think is really pretty. This is a knocked back version of it. It's not as severe as this. You could certainly paint this way. It has a lot of violets in it. I think it's beautiful. If you push this to the extreme, you get something like this with real granulation, which is also really lovely. The only reason we're not doing it this coloration, this is one of my favorite color combinations. However, we're painting other things in this class, the tangerines, this similar color. So I wanted to do something different for you. So I think we're going to go with this version, which I did take this photograph and we're going to use this with the softer stone colors. We're still going to use those violet blues, blue violets in here, a little burnt sienna, but it's just going to be a softer practice. So first thing we're going to do, as usual, is to do a wash of this nice light color combination we just made. And we'll just go over everything. Make sure my brush is clean. You can see how it makes this nice beige color. Or just everything that is has that undertone or that color underneath, which is pretty much all the stonework. And all of this, we'll just adjust it. So we're just going to go down with this color everywhere for an initial wash. You can go over the darker areas as well, because they're going to be darker, of course. So just go over everything. We've saved our whites. This is one of the reasons we save our whites. So this step can just be easier. Now, if it looks too heavy to you, just blot it out a little bit with a paper towel. I'm not going to paint that because that is not the stone. You could make it a little more on the yellow side. You could actually use yellow ochre for this if you wanted to. We're going to go a little darker. We get down here, paint around this fellow here. The dark, we're just going to put in some color here right now. It doesn't really matter because we'll be changing that, making that darker. Just drop it in. Actually, this is all white, so don't want too much of that there. This is also that color. This just gives you a starting point, your initial wash. It shows you everywhere that you're going to have to adjust values and so forth. Getting a little green down here. Let's mix in with some of that ultramarine blue. A little darker at the bottom, and on here with that burnt sienna mix. We'll go ahead and do all of this as well. Let's go darker here because that is that dark doorway. This is all darker in here. We'll get that darker in a minute. Now this is lighter over here, so let's go mix up a clearer mixture here. Now this is straight raw sienna, so if you want to compare that, well, it's mixed in actually with the other mixture there. Okay. And we can go in here with a mixture of those just to darken the base up a little bit here. We've got a lot of shadow over in here. So we've got a lot of shadow over in here. All right, just lift up anything that looks too heavy. And that's your first wash. Let's get that right there. Any places you missed. Okay. Keep your blue violets and this mixture as separate as you can because they will contaminate and then you'll get a neutral there, which you may not want. let's let this dry. Lighten up some of these areas if they got too heavy. Especially over here, everything's lighter. And when you're painting architecture, you have to pay a lot of attention to which way your lines are going, how they're, the perspective. And of course, you're doing a 2-point perspective here, which means the vanishing points are out here. If you were to take a ruler and follow the vanishing points on this side, you would end up with a vanishing point over here. And if you followed these lines, you would have a vanishing point over here. And you also have a third perspective up here. It would all eventually come up to there, but we're not worried about that right now. So we're just concerned with the 2-point perspective here. So just pay attention to which way these lines go as they change. They'll change angles as they curve around the building. That's what you need to remember. These are standing out from the facade, so they are going to have a turning motion. So that face of that pillar will come this way, and this face of this pillar will come that way to these 2-point perspectives. If you don't understand perspective, you really need to work on that, because it's critical when you're drawing and painting architecture of any kind. It is really important to get it correct. It's also really important to have straight lines on your building itself, the actual architecture, because if it's all crooked, it doesn't matter so much for the, that's the grout lines, so they don't matter, but the actual shape of the building itself does matter. So just keep that in mind. I think I'm going to go ahead and dry this with a hairdryer, and then we will do another layer.